Wow. Thank you, Sean, and welcome everyone to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters in the next hour is the future. Sean, that was amazing. Thank you for helping us kick off season 2 of Vision Chats. You are a musician, an artist, a Grammy-winning trumpeter, and we are fortunate to have you as the endowed chair of our jazz studies department at Peabody Conservatory here at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend an hour with me today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's awesome. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
This is great. This was the best intro we've had at Vision Chats, and I think a lot of people are applauding right now for just watching the comments. Sean, how did you get into this? How did you find your path towards music and jazz?
Wow. Well, honestly, music is something that I really can't remember not being involved with in my life at any point in time. I grew up in Warren, Ohio, which is pretty much smack dab in the middle of Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the Still Valley. And Warren is a very small town, working class town. And pretty much all there was to do was to go to work, shop every now and then, and go to church. Well, I was in church, specifically a Pentecostal church. I make a joke with my family. I was in church 8 days a week, 397 days a year. But inside of that environment, literally, the church services were improvised, and everything was mainly sung. And so music was just ingrained in what we do, and improvisation was ingrained in what we do. And we literally went with the spirit every Sunday morning or Friday night or Tuesday night, whenever the service was. And I learned a lot about just kind of emoting, adapting, and expressing in that environment. And it became a deep part of who I am as a composer, performer, and an educator. Actually, I add all of those things to how I teach and share with my students.
And that and it got you here to where you are. What I'm fascinated by is the process of composing a song, and the improv aspect of that, all of the steps that go into it. And so for all of us who are not really familiar with how that goes, break it down for us. How does that go? And then what can we learn from that to compose the song of our own lives? What are the parallels there?
Well, I have to say, you're a composer and you just don't know it. Would you happen to take a gander at what you compose every day?
Um, I don't know. Maybe my own story, maybe relationships.
Yeah, this conversation is a composition.
It is.
It
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
We're improvising,
Hmm.
and we're improvising based on a set of information and tools that we have in our tool belt, which is our brain, uh, language. And so our common ground is language and expression inside of that language. So every time you speak to someone, you're composing. Every time you take pen and put it to paper, you're composing. I would venture to say that you typically don't know exactly what you're going to write when you begin writing, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So we do the same thing. We just do it with notes. And so that process is prompted by emotional stimulation. It's prompted by events. It's prompted by the sun. It's prompted by the daughter or the son that we have. Just literally any thought could prompt a composition. And I think it's important once that prompt comes in to immediately engage in the emotional output of how it affects you in that time. And that's what I do as a composer. I literally use my life experience, um, my day-to-day living, um, things that have happened to me in the past that I can't seem to work through. I sit down and I emote through sound those feelings, and then they go out into the world. And once they go out into the world, you realize that, wow, folks are affected by that because they're composers as well. They have these same feelings, and perhaps they don't have the sonic ability to express that I do, but the reason that they listen is because they can relate. And so that's in essence what the composition process is like when you sit down and compose it. Now, when you're in the heat of the moment in this improvisation, which in essence is spontaneous composition, you have to allow those emotions to come out in a fleeting moment, and you have to be prepared to go wherever the mood takes you and wherever the band takes you. And so, you know, uncomfortability and sort of uncertainty are things that I thrive in as a jazz musician.
So here's the parallels that I draw when you describe this whole process with the process of designing your own life and composing your own life story and journey, um, and where I see the things that seem to make sense in the process of composing a song, feel like they have lots of obstacles in when we think of them in terms of life. So for example, I think of you're talking about just trusting in where the song is going to take you. So you're emoting, there is energy, you're there, you're not sure where it's going to go, but you're going to go with it anyways. And in a way, we encourage people to do that when they're thinking about their future, but there is fear there, and there's a lack of trust, and there's a discomfort with the uncertainty, and it blocks people from taking that inspiration and to moving it and turning it into action. And it's the few that move it into action who are able to somehow build a successful life or a life story. S-
Yeah.
Uh, so I suppose I'll start with the question is there fear in the process of composing a song? How does one overcome that? And how do you trust in yourself and say, I'm not sure if these notes are going to make sense, but I'm going to go along with it anyways?
Yeah, there's definitely fear there. We all face fear daily. Um, Even before COVID-19 hit, you
Mm.
never know what's going to happen. You never know if someone's going to hack into your bank account or your emails, or if your car is going to break down, or if the weather is going to be bad, or things like that. And so I find certainty inside of uncertainty. I am certain that I don't know what's going to happen. So I actually have faith in that. Faith, in essence, is the substance of things that you hope for and the evidence of things that are not seen, right? So we live in that every single day, and we keep waking up. And that's where hope comes into play. And how that is reflected in composition is that I know what the notes are. They just need to be organized. And we've been talking a little bit. There's a quote that I really love, and that is, eternity is in love with the creations of time. Eternity is in love with the creations of time. I believe that's William Blake. And I view eternity as being all things that were, are, and will be. And creation of time has a definitive beginning and a definitive ending. So everything that we conceive of and we can view and feel and touch and smell and all that, it has a block of time associated with it. Compositions are blocks of time.
Mm.
Eternity is in love with those creations of time. By the way, we are creations of time. Eternity is in love with us because eternity is being made manifest through us every single day. Like we're talking right now, we're dialoguing. That's faith in the unknown. That is the trust in all things and eternity existing. And so it's important for us to continue to do inside of the uncertainty so that all of eternity can be made manifest and we can view the glory of everything that we are and we're involved in. Even though we're a small part of it, we're still a part of the entire existence of all things that ever existed. And so I find hope, faith, and trust inside of all of those things. I'm not reinventing new notes when I start composing, just like you're not reinventing new words. What we're doing is we're organizing them into a concise thought to express eternity in the now.
Mhm. I think people are raising their hands in this chat, kind of like they're in church. I think that's how I'm interpreting that. People are really impacted by the quotes and by the conversations you're sharing. So, thank you. The other word that I think you alluded to in your conversation is the power of feedback. So, not only is trusting and overcoming the fear and having hope, but as you compose pieces of your life story or your song, putting it out there, it's kind of like what we talk about in life design is take your creation for a walk and let people see it and hear it and experience it, and that feedback
Yes.
is going to give you energy. Is that part of the process of composing a song too? And what kind of energy and how does that feed into the process of creation?
Oh, yes. What you're talking about is vulnerability. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back to, when you write
Mm-hmm.
and you want to express yourself, imagine yourself writing a letter to someone you love. Before you sit down and write that, do you feel a little bit of anxiety sometimes? Like, man, I don't know what to say. Do you ever feel that?
Yeah, all the time. I have anxiety every time I'm getting ready for these vision chats, because because there is no script to them. I do that on purpose. I mean, they're built based on an improv style where every time I invite a guest, I tell them I don't have preloaded questions for you. It's going to be a conversation in the chat, and I think the audiences connect with them. But I get scared that morning, like I'm sweating it the entire morning because I go like, what if we go into it and I just draw blank and I don't know where the conversation goes? Is that what you're alluding to?
That's exactly right. I mean, not just that, but what if the internet fails? What if
Yeah.
outside stimulus comes in and we actually can't do this? I mean, there are so many unknown factors that we deal with. What if the pencil breaks? What if I don't have the tools? What if my piano goes down? Or all of those things come into play, and they conjure up fear
Mhm.
inside of us. But in my view, the best way to deal with fear is to be in a constant state of vulnerability, a literal constant state of vulnerability,
Mhm.
being able to tackle and accept the fact that things will happen that don't go as planned.
Mhm.
A note, I'll chip a note sometimes, or maybe I'll write in a composition. I'll have a vision of what I want to do. And this happens to me all the time. I mean, especially with my band. Excuse me, my band is so fluid that typically when I bring a composition to them, it ends up being something completely different at the end of the rehearsal. It's something that I than what I brought in. And I just accepted the fact that my vision, or that thing that comes to me from eternity, it comes to me. But then when I express it and I open up my heart and my soul and it goes out into the world, it's no longer mine.
Yeah.
It's going to take on a life of its own. It's going to grow. And that's what happens when we put pen to paper or when we have conversations. This conversation is evolving and having a life of its own because it is living inside of the eternity that we're both living inside of. But because you had the vision to prompt the discussion, it's now being birthed and it's taking on a life of its own. And
Mhm.
that's the beauty of this time, and that's the beauty of composition in general.
Yeah, and you're right. Like it is a beauty of this time because now that we are all confined into our homes and given access, or most of us are given access to internet, a lot of us are venturing out into the process of creation and putting it out there. and that there's good and bad to that. Hopefully, a
This is
lot more
true.
good. The good part is that there's a ton of content and a ton of creation that is being put out there. The challenging one is that it's harder for all of us to figure out what is good and quality and what is not.
Yeah,
Uh,
if I could chime in on that, that's such an important point regarding content. And yes, there are creations constantly occurring, and I would chime in that balance inside of this is important. So the more good things you have, that means you have to have more bad things to offset them, and that's very hard to acknowledge. What would the sunshine be without the rain? What would the storm be without the calm, and vice versa? You literally need both of those things to exist so that you can appreciate both of them in their own context. And that's why that's why every song isn't in major. Major makes you happy. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. I'm happy,
yeah,
but sometimes I feel like a motherless child. You know, that's minor. You need both of them. And in the world we live in now, especially since we're all forced to sit here and look at it online or on our TVs or in social media or however we view it, we view the bad and the good. The question is, which rabbit hole do you want to go down more consistently?
right. That's right. Yeah, well said. Um, So, for people who don't know you, to tell us a little bit about your life and the focus of from an angle of resilience. So there were lots of things that all of us have gone through in our lives. The challenging points, the pivots that you have had to make, the decisions you've had to make, the hardship, and then how one can use resilience to just come through and reemerge even stronger. Um,
Wow.
Maybe that's one.
That's
Yeah. Go ahead.
it's that's such a speaking of rabbit holes. um, I can't, you know, discuss this without talking about my mother.
Uh-huh.
And I get really emotional when I speak about her because she's overcome so much in her life, and just by watching her, I've learned the power of change. I've learned the power of resilience and the power of faith. Before I came into the picture, she was married, and her first husband was literally decapitated in a car accident, and they brought her to the scene to identify him. I don't know if you can imagine that that pain that she must have felt. And she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, from what she says, and she found faith, and that faith got her through, and she remarried. And then I came into the picture, and then my father left when I was 5 years old, and so she's hit again with another loss, with another tragic loss. And my mother raised my father's kids. She raised her own kids from her first marriage, and she raised me all alone. She worked all the time. My oldest siblings basically raised me, and there were times where she would have to let bills go. And I just saw her resilience through that, smiling and still going to church and clapping and all that. And how that relates to my own life is I sort of got comfortable with being uncomfortable. And as I became a musician, there are many people saying, "Oh, your career's not going to be good. You're not going to make any money. You're not going to survive. How are you going to do this?" And I say, "Well, I'm making it now." We don't have anything now, so I'm kind of used to that. And so I kind of got into this mindset that I have to force myself to be in uncomfortable situations in order to grow. You know, everybody loves looking at the butterfly, but no one loves looking at the cocoon.
Yeah.
you know and so I want to be in a constant state of cocooning myself so
Mm.
that the butterfly continues to grow and evolve. So a couple instances in my life specifically that's happened. I was at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. I know you're CMU. You were there. Yeah, we
Yes,
crossed paths a little bit,
we
but
did our orbits. Yeah, we almost came together.
yeah, man, yeah. I hope you got some Pittsburgh popcorn when you were there.
Not here, but yeah, I should go back and get some. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I was teaching at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. I received tenure, and a feeling of sort of settling it came all over me, and I immediately start to think to myself like, oh no, tenure, no, I have to do something. I have to do something else. I have to evolve. So I started to look for different things, and lo and behold, the position for chair of brass studies at Berklee College of Music in Boston opened up. I applied for the position, and I decided to leave and give up tenure to go to an untenured, non-tenured position at Berklee College of Music, because I wanted to work for tenure, even though it didn't technically exist. I wanted to work for it again. And in the words of Miles Davis, any artist should be in a constant state of being uncomfortable. Once you get comfortable, your creativity is limited.
Mhm.
And so, another instance, at Berklee, I was starting to get comfortable again. I loved the job, loved my colleagues, loved the students. Berklee has a lot of bells and whistles, specifically for jazz music. But I started to again look for different avenues of teaching, and the position at Peabody opened up, and I looked at it and I said, "Wow, this is an opportunity to literally build a program from zero." And I wanted to take on that challenge, so that's what I did. Left Berklee College of Music and came down here to Baltimore. I've done that in my performing career as well. I was in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis, which is arguably the number one jazz ensemble in the world. And after being in that band for 6 years, I went to Wynton and I said, I have to spread my wings. I have to do my own thing. And he said, really? I said, yes, I'm going to leave the band. And within a year, I left the band and started really focusing on my own projects. And that's just kind of how I am. I'm constantly seeking a state of discomfort in order to grow. So those are just a few examples. I'm sure there's many that you could share as well. I mean, you were in Pittsburgh and
Yeah.
now you're here.
Yeah, I'm on my sixth state in the United States living in. So I've moved around quite a bit. Um,
Yeah, how does that feel for you?
like I mean, I see a lot of parallels in your story between our stories. As you were describing this, I'm thinking, oh my God, like he's describing my life journey. And it's taking me back to the caterpillar example that you used. So let me start there, and then I'll share my own examples. The caterpillar actually literally goes through a process of self-digestion. Scientifically, it literally eats its body in order to
Wow.
emerge as a butterfly, and that is a process that obviously literally and figuratively is messy. It's beautiful to watch, but it's messy. And to ask individuals or organizations or companies or schools or to literally eat parts of their being in order to emerge as a new being
Mhm.
is not easy, and that's why people resist change so much, and resist the idea of making themselves uncomfortable in order to emerge into a new state of comfortable. So for those of us who seek it out, you describe yourself as a discomfort seeker. I would put myself in that category. Is that when things are going too well, that's when I start getting the itch for something else. And it started with my journey when I grew up in North Africa in Algiers, and having dreams to go to another land. So here I am at the age of 18, 19, coming all the way to the United States, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, and starting a new life as a college student. and starting to learn English first, and then having to adapt to this whole new culture. That was probably my most audacious move in my entire life, is to just cross all of that. And actually, I had stayed about 8 years in the United States before I went back home for a first visit. So for 8 years, I hadn't seen family and I hadn't seen my own home country, and that
Wow.
and tried to adapt to this new life. And then it just basically, the journey took me all around the United States. Probably the most recent example is when we thought that Bay Area was going to be home forever, that I would be working at Stanford for forever. And then Johns Hopkins comes knocking on the door saying we have a big problem in the area of how to transition students into successful careers and lives, and we think you could be the one to help us figure that out. The attractive sentence there isn't "you could be the one." It's "we have a big problem." We have a big problem that we need to solve, and we're willing to throw all sorts of things at the wall to fix it. And that gets me excited, and that gets me extremely enthusiastic about the process of creation and change, and which I know is messy. And I always envision that process of a cocoon to a butterfly, and I'm thinking this is what we have to do. Is it literally um, get rid of pieces of our process in order to emerge with new and beautiful ones. And I had done that throughout my entire career in life, so I see definitely the parallels between our two lives.
Yes, for sure. And it's interesting. You mentioned the butterfly and how it has to consume itself. Well,
Yeah.
in essence, that is a version of death. Um, I have sort of this this affinity for birth and death and seeing them literally as one thing. Like for me, there's it's just a transition from forms, and that goes back to that statement: eternity is in love with the creations of time. Things happen, and I have a lot of records behind me. If you
Mm.
could see, I'm kind of a vinyl nut. And so the most prolific musicians and artists, they always document the moment. Like Miles Davis, for instance, he's arguably one of the most, if not the most recorded band leader in jazz history. And he literally changed with the times, and he would document where he was in that time and then move on and recreate himself and never visit it again, almost as if once he documented what he did, he then killed it inside of himself and moved on to the next. So I love that idea of literally consuming yourself. And typically when I speak, I use a lot of biblical references, just because that's where I grew up. I mean, going to church that much when I was a kid, they all come out. I'm not necessarily religious anymore. I'm sort of more of all arcing universalist. But there are a few things that I love that I learned when I was growing up, and one of them is from Paul, and he's one of the main contributors of the in the New Testament, and he said that I die daily. I die daily, and when I was a kid, I didn't understand it, of course, but now that I'm an adult, and I see that literally every day is an opportunity to reinvent. In order to reinvent, you have to destroy. In order to put up a new building, whatever is there has to go. And so I think, sometimes we allow ourselves to stay in bad circumstances just because it's comfortable. You know it. It's like every day I get up and here I am again. I don't like where I am, but at least I know it.
Mm.
I would challenge folks to wake up tomorrow and literally forget about all of the comfort that you know and the things that you're about, and just spend one day doing things that you've always thought about doing but you've never done, almost living as if you were someone else, just
Mhm.
for a day, and dive into that. And the feeling that you'll have at the end of the day is going to be so exhilarating and refreshing that perhaps you won't want to go back to that old self, you know?
That's fantastic, and this gives us an opportunity to jump into a real to into a very important conversation, Sean, about all of the things that are around us that are caterpillars waiting to turn into cocoons into butterflies. I am thinking about art in general, your entire industry. I'm thinking about education and higher education, our shared industry as educators. This whole thing has. Has needed a jolt in order to change and transform, and COVID has created that moment for us to finally say enough of being comfortable as worms. We we have to change.
Yeah.
uh, and I'm thinking about society with all of that is still sick about it. You know, the injustice that is there, the racism that exists, the prejudice, the things that are happening around the world, and how this moment might be forcing us to quiet down and to turn into a cocoon or cocoons in order to emerge as a more just society, as a more efficient system of education, as I don't know what the future of art would be. So I'm bringing a lot of things in here to the surface and saying, like, Sean, where do we go from here to go through the same process of discomfort in order to help us emerge as butterflies?
Yes, that's a great point, and those thoughts are things that I think about literally every day. And I remind myself that I'm a small part of what's going on in the world.
Mm.
The world has oceans, the world has huge land masses, the world has species that are much larger than me. And so, because we as human beings are such a small part of what is actually existing in the cosmos, it's going to be important for us to go back and realize that we have to change with it. The world is changing because it wants to change. And I look at COVID-19, at first I was thinking of it like, oh man, this is terrible. This sucks. But I now view it as a blessing. I view it as a blessing because the Sean that existed in March before my daughter got here is not the Sean that exists right now. I went through a complete transformation as a man over the past 4 months because of her, and it's really emotional to think about. And I think about the fact that, wow, if it wasn't for COVID-19, I would have been on the road. I would have been out there touring with my band. I would have been doing X, Y, and Z and just living life as Sean before March 12th. But because COVID-19 came along and I'm forced to be here and be isolated with my family, and I get to watch her grow up every single day. I get to see her mother take care of her and know what it's like for a woman to give that much daily. And it's really changed who I am as an empathetic human being. How it's changing the industry is literally what you see right now. Um, I have devices all around me that I haven't used ever. I'm learning new technology. I'm performing with people that I would have never had the opportunity to perform with before just because our paths just wouldn't have crossed. People are sending me tracks to overdub, and I'm learning how to overdub through Logic, which is a computer program that a lot of musicians use. And it's been a fantastic time of change. And I think that we're all experiencing that now, and when you're in isolation, it life kind of becomes a mirror, and you're forced to see yourself, the good and the bad. Now, how depending on the type of person you are, you could just continue to look at that thing in the mirror even though you know it's not all together, and just say, you start to make excuses. I actually said something the other day to a friend of mine. We all have reasons for why we do stupid things, but it's important to not allow your reasons to become your excuses. Excuses are ongoing. you adopt the behavior and say, well, that's just who I am. Well, now since we're all in this mirror, I would encourage everyone to really look in the mirror, spend time in isolation, get to know that person that's there, and assess that person, and grow. Work on the things that you can't do. Dive into that so that you can grow, so that you can eliminate those things that you are not comfortable with in your life, and then dive ahead forward. COVID-19, speaking of excuses, is a great excuse to change. And we're experiencing that in our industry with education. We have needed a huge overhaul. I mean, would you agree with that? I mean,
For sure.
specifically in higher academia, I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much that needs to change. And here we are being forced
Yeah.
into the change. So it's a wonderful gift. And I think that we should all look at it as that. And with any gift, there comes, you know, things that aren't so good about it. You know,
Yeah.
I remember just a little funny anecdote there, I guess. When I was a kid, I loved and hated Christmas time. And the reason that I that I loved it is because I loved the gifts.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stand the fact that most of those gifts had batteries and they would always forget to get the battery. So so it's like I have this gift that I can't use. So it's kind of like, you can have a love-hate relationship with things, but it's important to move ahead with them. So those are just a few
Yeah.
thoughts regarding change now.
Well, when you talk about education, higher education specifically, I feel like the entire industry, all universities in general, are in isolation now and are forced to look in the mirror right now. They have become these massive organizations of tradition and of wealth and resources. And all of a sudden, what we have is empty campuses all around the world and all around the country, with massive buildings and structures and endowments and people. And when the things that have, so using technology, for example, online learning, all of the tools that we're being forced now to use weren't created yesterday. We've had them for a couple of decades now, but we've resisted the move towards them for our love of tradition and what we have, but also for, I think there's an element of fear of trying something new that might break us. So we always just, as an industry, we experiment with things on the edges, and then we leave them on the edges. We don't bring them into the core of what we are and what we do. And now we are forced to do that, in different ways, whether in how we manage classrooms, how we deal with students, how we enroll students, how we connect them with alumni, how we send them on their way, on their pathways. And our students are in this experiment with us right now. How do
Yeah,
you see us
yeah,
change? Go ahead.
yeah. One thing that's interesting, I'm fascinated by what you're saying, and what your role is in the side of Hopkins, and it's so important. And one of the things I've always thought about in higher academia specifically, and how it relates to the bachelor's degrees
Mm,
and associate's degrees, is that it's not necessarily as mentor mentee focused. You have large classrooms, you have gigantic lecture halls, and there are so many students that really never even know what their professor is about. What kind of person are they?
yeah,
What do they like? And geez, the professors don't have a chance at all. It's like you got 300 students, and that's every semester. How do you get to know any of them
yeah,
without spending time in the office hours, things like that? So I think now is a wonderful time to really ramp that up, the mentor mentee relationship. Um, I don't teach to classes. I don't teach to classrooms. I teach individuals. And each one of those individuals has a very specific set of needs because they are specific in themselves. And I want to get inside of their head. I want to know who they are. I want to know if they are more of a visual learner. Are they more of a sonic learner? Do they do they enjoy more of project based learning? basically saying, okay, here's this way of looking at this composition. I want you to do this, and this, and then come back to me when you're ready, and we'll dive into the next thing. Not necessarily thinking like, okay, here's class, here's your assignment. I'll check it when you're done, when you turn it in next week, and then we'll talk about it, and we'll keep going. Then you'll have a test, and then goodbye.
Mhm.
So I'm really into the mentor mentee type of relationship. And as our institutions get larger and larger and larger, it's going to continue to be more of a challenge. But perhaps because we are more or less online now, and we have to deal with looking at folks, looking in their eyes. I'm looking at you now. And maybe we could get to that a little bit better now.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and what you're describing is the difference between transactional learning and a relationship based learning, the human centric learning. And I think that there's a major difference there between just giving someone a curriculum and and a list of assignments and a structure for them to learn, versus a community-based, relationship-based, connections-based learning, where they're using these relationships not only just with the faculty but also with each other as students, and with alumni who can be engaged in that, and with the greater community to engage in that process. And you're right. I think this process is forcing us to do that, and we now have to figure out how to deliver that at scale. How do you deliver the intentional individual interaction in learning, but still at scale, because our resources are still finite, and perhaps more so now. And there's an existential threat to universities as we know them today.
Yes. And it's going to be increasingly important for our professors and our students to just sort of think outside of the parameters that we're given. We're
Mhm.
just all going to have to give more of ourselves in this time.
Yeah.
And I say that as a, as a father. I say that.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. What's that?
I said congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Phoebe Eileen is her name.
Phoebe Eileen,
Yeah,
beautiful.
she's named after the great songwriter and vocalist Phoebe Snow. If you're out there in the ethos and you haven't heard of Phoebe Snow or heard her music, check it out.
Check it out.
It's
Okay.
amazing music. Um, so it's going to be a challenge because we have our family lives and we have to do all of that. But it's going to be important for us to just be flexible, to be accommodating, and to be there. I think about now one of the big things that I think we got to tackle in education, and in my industry, is mental health.
Mm.
And I worry about our students. I worry about our artists. I worry about our folks that are in the service industry and how they're coping now, because of it's not just a money thing.
Mhm.
We do what we do because we love the interaction. We love performing. We love getting on that stage and expressing and getting reactions and things like that. So if you don't have that, you could spiral into a level of depression that's there, um, that's hard to climb out of. And so I'm constantly reaching out to friends, reaching out to folks to try to create during this time, and just again thinking outside the box, and trying to get folks to dive into new aspects of their performance and compose new things, um, write about their pain, write about their suffering. And I'm happy to be in an institution that really takes this seriously, at Hopkins. And it's wonderful that we have all the resources that we have. But I think that it's going to be increasingly important with our professors to continue to engage on it as much as we can with our students, just checking in to see how they're doing during this time, checking on the cocoons to make sure they're still, shaking themselves up so they can get out of that cocoon and be the butterfly, you know.
Great. Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love it. One of the things in this context also that's greatly impacting our students and just our community in general is the resurgence, or the emergence of the emerging discussion about inclusion and diversity and Black Lives Matter coming back to the service. Probably because now we're all forced to just quiet down and pay more attention. Maybe that's why. I mean, I wondered for actually for the last several weeks, what's different now? I mean, it feels different. We still have a lot of work to do, but what's different now? Why did uh, Black Lives Matter strike such a tone this time?
Yeah.
And where could we go in terms of making society more of what should be? What are your thoughts about that? Like, what has changed this time that the George Floyd wasn't the first person, black man, to be murdered at the hands of law enforcement, but for some reason the reaction worldwide was felt more intense this time than in the past.
Yeah. The difference is that we're all forced to watch it.
Mm. Hmm.
And the first time that something like this happened was with the Rodney King um, incident in Los Angeles. And the reason why that had the effect that it had is that was the first time really that something that just all overtly criminal happened in front of our eyes. I mean, there's no denying that that was wrong. And the same thing happened here with George Floyd. I mean, I, I would challenge everyone that's here, just try to hold your breath for 1 minute. Literally 1 minute, try to hold your breath. This man had his knee on that man's neck for 8 minutes and 36 seconds.
Mm.
I mean, that's just inhumane. And
Can
so
we
we were, I'm sorry.
can we try that now? 1 minute,
Yeah, let's try it. Ready?
everybody. I want to ask all of our people who are watching just 1 minute. I can't do it. It's hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And we watched this. We all were at home. We're quarantined. It happened at the earlier part of states and local municipalities um, forcing uh, quarantining and isolation. And you saw it on the news. You saw it online, and that's the difference now. Um, this country, we have a lot of reckoning. While there's so many beautiful things about it, so many beautiful things in the Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men are created equal and have unalienable rights. That all sounds good. But the problem is when the folks that are writing it only believe that that works for a certain group of people, and they bring in another sect of people that they don't see in the same light, then you have issues from inception. And that's why I love James Baldwin when he talks about this. He speaks about it not totally as a black white issue. He discusses it as an American issue. And I was looking up because I'm working on a project now, actually, ironically, for Pittsburgh, which is going to be called Scenes from the Mirrors of America. And the quote that prompted this is a James Baldwin quote that says this: "And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means: that we with love shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality and begin to change it. That is how we integrate. We have to accept one another as equal, literally equal. We are the same. There's only one race. There's the human race. And this is old as world history. A lot of people don't know this, but one of the first, if not the first, separation of people into a caste system or class system was with the Code of Hammurabi, thousands of years ago, arbitrarily separating people by race in the class systems. You know, and it all stems back, in my view, from this.
Mm.
And I really truly hope that this great American experiment doesn't unravel because of our inhumanity towards one another. But I remain hopeful because, you know, change is slow. It's slow and it's hard and it's uncomfortable. It's all the things that we've been talking about during this time. And I also think, going back to why people are so affected by it now is because they are affected by their own isolation. They're affected by being locked up in a house.
Mhm.
Think about what these folks in prison are feeling.
Mhm.
Folks that get arrested for a misdemeanor and they find themselves locked away in a cell waiting for trial for over a year. We've only been doing this for 4 months. We have a lot to deal with in this country, and I remain hopeful. I do remain hopeful because the vast majority of the people that I interact with online or on Zoom or all that, they're good people. And I think that we're just in a process. A good friend of mine, his name is John Baptiste. He's on the Colbert Show. He's the artistic director of the music. Good friend of mine mentioned the other day on television. He said that we're in the process of the great unlearning. We're in the great unlearning for our country. We're breaking down things. There are a lot of things that need to die in order for that rebirth and new birth to take place. So I remain hopeful.
I do too, Sean, and I appreciate your encouragement and the sense of hope that you're instilling in all of us. There's so many questions online from people who are chiming in, and I should tell you that people are really, really appreciating the sense of spirituality that you're bringing into the conversation. So thank you for that. There are a couple of questions about how we get ourselves unstuck. That we're talking a lot about being stuck is a major obstacle to emerging as a butterfly, either as a person, an individual, or as a society, or as an organization. So, for the process of change, being stuck is a major blocker. Um, I think of authors, and sometimes as I try to author a piece, I have this mental block, writer's block. Maybe there is such a thing for musicians too. Is that you feel
Oh
stuck
man,
and you can't get the notes out and you can't compose. So how do you get yourself unstuck so that you can create this magic?
you don't.
You don't get yourself unstuck. Okay, you throw.
No, you stay there. And in the process of composition, there in writer's block, that is a necessity that most people don't embrace because they want to finish. They want it to be done. It has to be done. And I'll go back to the butterfly example. You can't rush that process.
That's right.
Why? Because if you rush it, then the butterfly dies. When I was younger, I used to ask my grandmother all the time. She'd make these cakes. I'm like, when is the cake done? When is the cake done? She said, it's done when it's finished.
Mm.
And that's the same thing as anything. That's a process. Sometimes you get an idea, a germ element, and that's what if you look at Beethoven's one of his symphonies, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, that literal thing evolved over time, over a year, and it just grew into a symphony. But it started off as da 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 dum, 4 notes. Da 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 da. And then it became da 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 da. Da 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 da. It's like, whoa. Oh, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. Then it stops. And that's when it's time to take the composition, put it away, and allow it to marinate. Allow that thought to just permeate. Stay there, stay there, stay. Going back to when I was younger, man, in those church services, sometimes we would do something that's called a tarrying service. And the word tarry literally means, as far as I know it means to stay. And so we would go at about 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and stay there all night and just pray. Drone. Just hearing that note over and over again and allowing that note to stay there and staying in a meditative space of mind. Staying in a space of mind where you are accepting literally everything that you are feeling right now in this moment. Accepting the fact that you're uncomfortable, accepting the fact that the notes aren't coming, the words aren't coming. So I stay there in the drone. And you stay there until something comes out of you and it's birthed, right? That's where there's a reason that babies take 9 months. Try to take a baby out at 3 months because you're tired of being pregnant, it's probably not going to go so well. You got to wait until until the fullness of time comes. And I think right now what happens is we are so accustomed in today's time to getting everything right now. We want our food right now. We want this right now. We want it. This has to happen now. No, you got to stay and wait. Patience is extremely important. Going back to something I learned when I was a kid, there's a verse that says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the trying of your faith worketh patience, and let patience have its perfect work so that you could be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. The fact that you can be content to be at peace with just being here with yourself, by yourself, with only yourself, in that meditative state, that's when the blessings come. That's when hope comes. That's when all of these things come to get you through and to get you into that next time and that next way of being. We all have to be patient inside of this moment, which is 2020. A lot of people are already talking about, oh no, 2021. We got to go to 2021. We got to get there. What's New Year's? No, be right here, right now. And allow that discomfort, that pain, that suffering, that unnerving feeling that you get every morning when you don't know if your bank account is going to have money in it. You don't know if your refrigerator is going to be full. Being at peace in that moment, that will allow you the opportunity to then be at a place of peace to make plans for the future without rushing them. There's a great book by Eckhart Tolle that's called The Power of Now. And inside of that book, there's a chapter at the end that's called Surrender. And that is surrendering to the moment, literally being at peace and accepting I am in this place right now. And from that place of peace, you can go on to make plans for the future.
Man, that was awesome. I have been looking for an answer to that question of how do you get yourself unstuck for years, and you have finally answered it for me. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
What I just learned in these last few minutes around that question specifically is to not fight it, to sit still, and to embrace being stuck for a while because it is part of the process. You have to stay in that cocoon for as long as it takes, and that is true while we're stuck in COVID-19. That is true for what society is going through right now when we're talking about racial justice and injustice that's happening and prejudice. that is true for all of the individuals who are stuck in process of designing their own lives and trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. You have just given the key to that, which is to embrace it. It is part of the process. Take it in and sit still. So I finally have my answer, and I hope everybody else does. Sean, what's one image that comes to mind when you think of the future, when to describe the future?
One image is a blank sheet of paper. Another image is the sky without any clouds. Another image is a placid lake, literally scenes of nothingness, because we can't see it. We can't see the future. We can project, but it's unknown. While seeing those visions of nothingness, that's when eternity comes and gives us projections, so that those projections become songs, so that those projections and those visions that come to us from eternity turn the blank slates into something. And that's what I see. I literally wake up every day hoping to see a blank slate, so that I can then compose songs. I can then write things. So that's what I see.
Well, I love that. I have visions of butterflies everywhere. So and I will wait patiently for the day when that happens. Um, you have probably no idea how much you've impacted me personally today. Everything you said is exactly what I needed to hear at this moment, and I hope everyone watching us today and will watch in the future will feel the same way. Thank you so much, Sean, for spending this hour with us at Vision Chats. You are the perfect kickoff to season two. I want to remind everyone that the only certain vision for the future is the one that you create. Thank you, Sean, for being with us. Will you take us out with another song?
For sure. Yes, I will. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.